So, like every year, 2024 had its ups and downs concerning movies. By now, you've probably seen several reviews, critiques, or wild takes that you didn't quite agree with. Oh, there's plenty of those on the web. Someone on Reddit disliked your favorite TV show so much that they wrote a 5-paragraph post disliking it. Or even worse, some lackluster / mid-tier movie is receiving praise and being heralded as the best, most beautiful thing ever made, and you just can't understand it. Or maybe, even here on YouTube, a movie review you saw didn't quite sit well with you. Maybe even I've said something that you disagreed with in the past. Wherever the case is, everyone's had some gripes with the reception of movies in general, right? That's what this video is all about. To preface, 2024's film reception can pretty much be summed up into two extremes. 1. Mid-tier movie or TV show gets absolutely shat on by the internet for being the worst absolute trash. 2. Mid-tier movie or TV show gets heralded as the peak of cinema, a magnum opus of cinema itself, as flawless masterpiece. You don't say. Yeah, these two extremes nicely portray my biggest movie gripes of 2024. There's 5 of them, so let's start with number 5. The Madam Web treatment. Well, I may be in the minority here, but I still don't think Madam Web was as bad as the internet painted it out to be. I remember seeing so much negativity after it released on Valentine's Day, and so I said to myself, oh, I'm not watching that. Until about a month later when my brother and I were watching TV and chanced upon it. And I guess you already know what I thought about it after. Definitely not what I was expecting. So I looked at the reviews and those weren't as negative as I had expected either. What I'm sure happened was a lot of the people that watched it said it was bad. Then a lot of the people that didn't watch it saw those reviews and said it was very, 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 very bad. I myself am very much included here, hence the overwhelming negativity. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this was a good movie. Heck, it definitely had problems. YouTube reviews I saw were mostly just laughing at how fumbled the story and most characters were. The villain's voice didn't always match what he was saying or doing at times. Some things felt too conducive for the plot, like with how many times crashing into the villain with a vehicle was used. Generally, just a lot of eye-roll moments, and the trailer was probably a tad bit misleading. And for the most part, I actually agree with these reviews. Like, I'm not blind to these things. But even all that's besides the point when you realize Madam Web isn't a character that a lot of people care about. Absolutely no one asked for this, hence not a lot of people cared to actually watch it. However, everyone had something to say. Oh, the story was terrible, and the title was bad, the trailer was bad, the theater experience was bad, it flopped at the box office, the characters were bad, the acting was bad, the CGI was bad, the pacing was bad, the directors were bad, the marketing was bad, the budget was too expensive or too cheap, the cinematography was bad, the music was bad, the lighting was bad, the colors were dull, the imagery was bad, yada yada yada. See, it's not a constructive review if it only tells you that the thing was bad, but not why the thing was bad. If anything, these kind of reviews only perpetuated the negativity. Heck, I saw some reviews that were dragging on how a 2-second shot broke the rule of 180 in cinematography or something like that. I mean, come on, at that point, that's just nitpicking. Short of the matter is, this was a mid to bad tier movie. Sure, but it's not like the worst movie ever. My take on this is, if all you can remember about a movie you watched is that it was just bad, or only a few popular memes, I personally don't remember any, then it probably wasn't that bad. I'll further explore this talking about other gripes, so I don't say everything here, and if I had to react to this movie with one emoji, it definitely wouldn't be the puking emoji, more like a disappointed emoji, or a grimacing emoji, maybe even a laughing emoji. Moving on, gripe number 4. The imaginary treatment. yet another mid-movie that the internet decided to pick on. You cute little bullies. See, I don't even think this was bad. Now, you probably haven't seen or heard of this one, but I'm positive you've unknowingly come across a negative review of it somewhere. Imaginary is a horror movie about a little girl's imaginary friend, Chauncey, who wasn't that imaginary after all. Plus, turns out he's an old friend. This one came out earlier in the year, March I think, and it's yet another one that I watched with my brother on TV. Now, I'll admit, I had the remote and I almost switched channels in like the first 10 minutes of watching because I was thinking, oh no, yet another movie that's going to force some disgruntled politics down my throat and expect me to eat it up, no questions asked. But we watched a bit more, I guess, so we started to get entertained. And to me, it was a fun little horror movie without the usual politics, thankfully. Full context, I'd never even heard of this movie before I watched it, and I didn't fully disagree with the reviews I saw. You know, it's probably the politics thing that made me rate this one. Like I said, it was earlier in the year, so my trauma from 2023 movies was still fresh, and seeing a movie that didn't try to do all that was a welcome change of pace, I guess. Man's legit got trauma from 2023 movies, which explains the initial pessimism. Yeah, I can't even blame the people who say f*** and continue to hate on everything. I'll say more about this elsewhere, so moving on. Gripe number 3. That Arcane Season 2 was rushed, which is probably the most widespread of the negative reviews this season. For this one, I can't even disagree completely because I waited for all the episodes to drop before I watched it. Unlike most of you who watched it 3 episodes per week for 3 weeks. And I very much get this take because I remember feeling the same way for The Boys Season 4 earlier in the year. And I since learned that for me, watching a show in bits like that could take from, if not, ruin the entire experience. I rewatched all of Season 1 as Season 2's episodes were coming out and watched Season 2 like a day after the final episode dropped. And comparing the pacing of both seasons, it wasn't that different. Sure, there's probably more time skips in Season 2, but you'll have to understand, it's the final season. Everything had to be tied up here. I've seen worse takes about Season 2, and personally, I still like Season 1 better. Gosh, Season 1 was the masterpiece. So nothing too wild here. Word for you if you felt this way. It may have been that the waits in between episodes spawned more expectations that weren't met, and the pacing was probably the easiest bit to pick at. So you should probably wait for everything to come out, like I do. Next gripe, the Anora treatment. I bet you've already seen a couple of videos about the best movies of 2024. I made one myself if you'd like to go watch that. But a surprising name that popped up in all of those top 10 lists was Anora. Every single list I saw had this movie on it, and I was waffled. Now, Anora is basically a modern-day Cinderella story about a sex worker from Brooklyn who found her prince charming, and at this point you've probably heard all about it and how revolutionary it was for the cinema space, how amazing the acting was, how masterfully crafted the story is. Like, okay, I get it, it's a good movie, but I'm watching this and thinking to myself, this is not a 10, maybe like a 7 or an 8. And again, I'm obviously in the minority here, but that's what I thought about it. If you liked it that much, good for you. This definitely isn't me dumping on you. We all have our different tastes. This one just isn't like my 10 out of 10 top tier movie of the year. So you can at least understand how hard it is for me to wrap my head around how this movie is rated so high. Here is a list of 5 2024 movies that had lower ratings than Anora, at least on Rotten Tomatoes. Dune Part 2, Furiosa, Inside Out 2, Deadpool and Wolverine, and The Substance. I guess the audience ratings on Google is generally more reflective of what majority of the audiences think, so those will always be my go-to. And for the final movie gripe of 2024, the take that 2024 was a bad year for movies. See, I don't agree there. There's probably two ways to assess if a year was great or terrible for movies, based on the good movies that came out that year, or based on the bad ones that came out that year, and which side had more. Basically, by the extreme ends and not the middle ground. However, I'm of the opinion that majority of 2024's movies were mid. That would explain why the internet treated mid-tier movies like the worst garbage ever made, or treated mid-tier movies like the absolute crown jewels of cinema, because there were so few of said extremes. Think about it. What was your worst movie or TV show of 2024? Madam Web? Borderlands? Now, what can you remember about those movies? Other than that, they were bad. The characters' names? The story? My point is, if the worst movies and TV shows of the year were that forgettable, and all you did was make memes and laugh about them, then it probably wasn't a bad year for movies. For comparison, trip down memory lane so you get the gist. The worst things to taint the 2023 movie scene: Velma, Queen Cleopatra, and Robin Hood. The terrible triple. And I solemnly apologize if those names triggered someone's PTSD. Man, movie PTSD in 2023 was 100% a real thing. Race swapping ages-old solid characters, historical misrepresentation, the aggressive girl boss trope, overall aggressive politics throughout. See, if those are the things you'd remember long afterwards when thinking about the worst movies or TV shows of a year, then that year was probably a bad year for movies. So it serves as a reference here. Not forgettable or just plain boring, with like 2024's film catalogue. If we're to consider the best movies that came out, however, 2024 wasn't as sluggish as the other years. I personally saw some hard hitters, enjoyed them. Almost all were received well by the internet, and they pulled profits as well. So yes, the take that 2024 was a bad year for movies doesn't really sit well with me. So those have been my biggest movie gripes of 2024. Hopefully, 2025 won't be a slug year either. And more great movies get to grace our screens. Get subscribed, share your responses, and hopefully you'll not never see my videos ever again. That said, catch you later.